we can see the web as being a big online conversation, and so accessibility is about having everybody involved in that conversation. The governments and education organizations are also using the web. We hear digital, putting everything online instead of paper. But with that comes the idea that everything's got to be accessible because it's for all of your citizens, all of your students, all of your members, all of your customers. And the other side of it is that we don't know what people are going to use to look at the web in 10 years' time. Nowadays we're using phones, but we weren't doing that 10 years ago. In 10 years' time, voice may well have taken over, or we might just be wandering around with awesomely capable sunglasses on and getting all of our web straight into our eye sockets that way. So stuff that's accessible is far more robust for the future technologies. Who benefits? It's like a murder mystery sometimes, means, opportunity and motive, and a question we keep asking is who benefits from any kind of usability. And so we normally break down web accessibility into a few topic areas. I've put these in a particular order. I've put visual impairments down at the bottom underneath motor and hearing and cognitive. These are the different categories we generally put them in. I've ranked them with visual down at the bottom because often when we say accessibility, people think, oh yeah, that's making sure that websites work with screen readers. It's about blind people. Indeed, that lawsuit against the Beyonce website was filed by a blind plaintiff. And if you read the details of the lawsuit, practically every sentence has got the word blind in there. But it's not just about blind people. There are also people who have motor impairments. Perhaps they may have a tremor in the hand. Perhaps they may only have one hand. Perhaps they may not have the use of hands at all, and they're using a different motor approach to control their devices. Familiar to all of us from the television will be characters like Stephen Hawking, who famous for using a speech synthesizer and using as things went along, different devices to control his computer as his motor impairments progressed and he lost more of his fine motor control. He eventually ended up with a switch that was operated by twitching his cheek, and it was a little switch that hung underneath his spectacle frames. And so with just one button, you can operate a computer. Above that, we've got hearing impairments. Hearing impairments would be, I have tinnitus, and so I can hear fine and have a conversation with you, but some environments where there's a lot of noise going on, I can have real difficulty with a conversation because it all kind of turns into a little babble, and there's a constant ringing going on in my ears. Some people might have no hearing at all. And so hearing impairments can be addressed by attention to video, providing captions or transcripts for those. And then the reason I've made these into this particular order is that from top to bottom, they're bigger groups. And the biggest group of all is people with a variety of cognitive impairments, different, what we call neurodiversity is a term you'll hear, different neurotypes. This includes people, say, with ADHD or autism, people who have learning differences, dyslexia, aphasias, all sorts of things. And this is a very big and diverse group, and if anything, that could be the hardest thing to try and design for accessibility, is in the cognitive area. This is something you'll keep coming back to: cognitive, hearing, motor, and vision. I think my slides are not the right size. So not all disabilities are equal. Everything varies in context. People can be hard of hearing, but that doesn't mean they're completely deaf. They might be better in one ear, better in certain situations. Vision loss can be a progressive disorder. It can come in degrees, from someone who uses spectacles to someone who has no vision at all. And in between, there are people with different kinds of spectacles, different kinds of vision aids, like a screen magnifier. Not all disabilities are permanent and built in. Some of them are very temporary. Some of them might be, we normally call a broken wrist. In a plaster cast, we'd say you were kind of temporarily one-handed. But another way of looking at that is that you might actually have your phone in one hand and be, breastfeeding a child in another. And so again, you kind of only have the use of one arm because one arm is busy. Some people are disabled from an early age, and many others acquire disabilities as they go through life. Environments can affect things, so you may not have a disability at all except for the environment that you're in, or your environment might make the disability worse. And later in the day, we'll look at some bits of assistive technology. I've mentioned a few already, like speech control, and mentioned unusual interface devices. This is a list of some of the things that you might come into. It's interesting that voice used to be something that was considered an accessibility tool. The idea that you could control a computer by saying, click this button. You would actually speak the words or show numbers, choose 6. But voice commands are now becoming mainstream. We use them while we're operating a car. We use them every day now in our homes with devices like Alexa. And some of these are built into your operating system. Some of them you add on later on. More of the stuff, braille displays, different kinds of mice, laser-mounted head-mounted laser pointers. They're worth a pretty penny, but they're awesome. All sorts of things which are ergonomic, different kinds of mice, different kinds of keyboard, different places that you can put a keyboard or mouse in. And to a computer, it's just a keyboard. It doesn't actually know whether it's one of these QWERTY type keyboards or whether it's a one-handed keyboard or a keyboard that's split in 2 halves. It doesn't know whether you're using a mouse or a trackball, which is like a mouse that's the right way up. This slide is about who's responsible for accessibility. I won't go into that in depth yet, but essentially everyone. It's the whole team. A lot of people just think it's about front-end developers. It's everyone involved. And this is something which I'll introduce you to now, and we'll have a look at throughout the day. There are lots of standards for accessibility, and they come from the W3C, World Wide Web Consortium, which has a whole initiative, a set of teams who are working on this kind of thing. And there are guidelines which are standards for accessibility. We're now at WCAG 2.1. This is slightly out of date. So just as there are CSS standards and HTML standards, there are these ones. This is what they look like, the Web Accessibility Guidelines. I'm going to actually enter into one of those documents and see how they're actually structured. And back on the previous slide, I had 4 things, and I said that they were, let's look at them, they were perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Throughout the day, I'm going to take you through here in the left-hand side. We can see that perceivable is that, because that's how WCAG is organized: and operable, and understandable, and robust. And they all have subsections. So understandable means it's readable, it's predictable, you get help with forms. Operable means you can use it with a keyboard, you can find your way around. Perceivable means that, you know, has stuff to do with the use of color and the sizing of text. That's how it's organized. Perceivable, can you actually make out what's on the page? Operable is, you know, can you interact with what's on the page? That is to say, there are buttons, there are form elements. There may be some custom JavaScript widgets. Have they been designed with accessibility in mind? Can I operate it without a mouse? And then understandable, this takes us certainly into that cognitive area. Is it an easy thing to read?